just as VC funding isn't for every business, doesn't mean it can't be a great business still. Like the same, every founder may not be a fit for an accelerator, but I can definitely think of the right stereotype, someone who could go into an accelerator and really come out the other end a way more competent founder.
Square Peg partner James Tyan said it was not just startups facing financial pressures of the so-called tech winter, but the funds themselves.
If you were to measure the pitch deck as part of the entire process, I think you said 5%, I'd say even less, but it is a critical step to get that first combo if you're not getting a warm intro.
We've said this internally, like a good time to raise a fund is normally a shit time to invest into startups. And then a good time to invest in startups is usually a difficult time to raise a fund. And we're in that stage right now. Like it's a really good time to invest in startups, but it's really bloody hard to raise a fund.
The article goes on to say new smaller venture capital funds to launch in the past few years include Side Stage Ventures, Afterwork Ventures, Black Nova, Galileo Ventures, and Flying Fox.
We missed out, boys.
We missed out.
Elon Musk is just a lucky jerk who made a career off other people's work. And if you think he's the best, just know he'll never be your daddy. Cause Elon Musk has got too many kids already.
Good afternoon, lads. How are we?
Really bloody good. How are you both?
Going well.
Even though it's cold here, I think we're warmer than Jack. Jack, you sent through some pictures that it's iced over in Adelaide.
Yeah, and like, especially where I live in Adelaide, it's near the beach. So it's not normally as cold as the hills, but this morning the car was very frosty.
No climate change here.
Here was I complaining about, I think it's like 13, 14, something in Brizzy.
Double digits. Like, come on, guys.
Queenslanders, mate. That's freezing.
You had another win on the weekend, Jack?
Yeah, it's not even worth mentioning. Like, it's a shit car.
Jack.
What was the score?
Oh, I think it was like 80 to 90 nil. Like, it's not even not fun for anyone.
They couldn't even get a point on.
But this weekend we got top of the table clash, and they beat us last time, so it will be a good game at home.
But I'm looking forward to Aaron's wedding, aren't you, Jack?
Jack, tell the listeners like your order of priority of how you'll be spending that weekend.
Yeah, so the grand final, which it's a 2-horse race at the moment, so it's looking like we're going to be in the grand final, falls on the same day as Aaron's wedding. So unfortunately, I've had to give Aaron's wedding a miss.
I've been trying to explain this to Mara, and she still doesn't understand.
Yeah.
He's the captain. He can't not turn up. He's Captain Jack.
Oh, I get it.
As soon as I got the date, I saw it straight away. I was like, that is the grand final. And I was just waiting. I was like, how do I tell you this? Like, when is the right time? Like, at what point in the season do I let you know? And then came up over London.
That's all right. You're forgiven, Jack.
I'll have to make it up to you and Mara and somehow.
Well, no, just dedicate a try to us.
Yeah, if we don't win, that's going to be awful, isn't it? Like, I missed your wedding and we lost.
It'll be awkward come Monday morning, the following week.
Got a few little things to get through today. I don't know if you've noticed, but we now that the podcast is getting a little bit of traction out there, I'm regularly fielding a few requests. A gentleman late last night wanted to come on the basis that he was sexy. I think what he's established is there's very little value being added. So maybe that's the direction.
Look, he's probably going to add more value than we do, so probably should have him on.
Yeah, I was going to say, fair comment.
I mean, my response to him is my role in this is to make you two look good. Given Jack gets confused for Jason Statham or Vin Diesel or Tom Hardy. There's a Tom Hardy? No, Tom
Brady.
In there.
Tom Brady.
Tom Brady.
And also gets all the comments about the most value add for words spoken.
Yeah, it's a lot of BS.
And the other thing this past week, awesome friend of Tribe, Mark Sowerby, completed the Ocean 7, the hardest 7 swims in the world, combined together into something called the Ocean 7 marathon swims. And he's completed all 7 as of a couple of days ago. And not just completed them, but completed each of them on first attempt, which puts him at only 3 people in the world to have ever done that. So epic achievement.
And when we say a long swim, what was that last one?
He did it in 10 hours. He was expecting it to be somewhere between 13 to 15 hours in the water. And this is off the coast of Japan, 13 degrees Celsius water temp in shark-infested waters where they actually have to drag a sheet underneath him in the water so that the sharks can't see him. That's his protection against getting eaten.
Wow.
Yeah.
That just makes me nervous. I cannot swim in water that I can't see the bottom of.
I just can't swim. Like, I just can't. No
Oh,
way.
I would have trouble driving a car 10 hours.
Yeah. So huge achievement. Years of training, prep, nonstop to pull that off. Just phenomenal.
Yeah.
Real lesson in resilience. And, we often reference Mark in different mental models and other things for founders and overcoming fear and decision making. And he definitely embodies a lot of those principles.
Yeah. Well, speaking of people that don't embody potentially a lot of principles, that might be too aggressive segue. Did you catch the US presidential debate? I know this is supposedly an Australian tech ecosystem, but we can't not discuss that given if the free world descends into madness, I think we're all in trouble.
Well, from the looks of it, it's about to far out like that. It wasn't even a debate. It was just, it's worrying.
I mean, I have some empathy for a lot of the American people that have the conspiracy theories about the deep state and the shadow arm of the real power, because how the fuck is Biden? Put aside, he may have done some wonderful things and be a great leader. How the hell, in a country of 300 and something million people, is he the Democratic nominee? Clearly, either has dementia, Parkinson's, something, or he's also 81. He's just old. Like, life's not fair sometimes. And I'm sure when I get to that age, I'm hoping I'm still punching on. This is like serious stuff, isn't it?
Yeah. Did you see the side by side of the previous debates versus current, and just how much he's completely incoherent now?
Well, Aaron, funny you should say that. I thought I might just play a couple of bits. All right. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Firstly, Jack, you won't know what this means, but there was a very funny movie called Weekend at Bernie's. It was about a dead guy that was kept around. This one here for listeners at home, this is Weekend at Biden's, and Obama and Kamala Harris are holding him up. Let's just have a listen to this quickly. Look, we shouldn't be so flippant of a human that has dedicated their life to the public good and the civics, but the reality is you get old, you age, there's a thing called cognitive decline. Time to move on.
Looks like it. And look, if they don't replace him as the candidate, you'd have to predict Trump's going to win.
And so when we say Trump's going to win, I just want to make sure we mean this particular guy. This is also from the debate.
You would be 82 at the end of your second term. What do you say to voters who have concerns about your capabilities to serve?
Well, I took 2 tests, cognitive tests. I aced them, both of them, as we made it public. He took none. I'd like to see him take one, just one, a real easy one. Like go through the first 5 questions, he couldn't do it. But I took 2 cognitive tests. I took physical exams every year. And, we knock on wood wherever we may have wood, that I'm in very good health. I just won 2 club championships, not even senior, 2 regular club championships.
Knock on wood wherever we may have wood. Oh, I want to turn that into a T-shirt. And then the evidence put forward is I won 2 club championships.
Oh,
There's a saying that you get the politicians you deserve. Americans as a whole must have done some really bad shit to deserve these 2.
yes.
I just found a few things. Again, this is potentially the leader of the free world.
These guys, you'll never get them done. You'll never get them done. They don't have any clue. All they know is electric. They want electric army tanks. They want electric planes. What happens if the sun isn't shining while you're up in the air? Well, sir, I told you there'd be problems, sir. No, they want electric everything. They want electric boats. The problem, the boats, they don't float because the battery is so heavy, it sinks the boat. They say, we don't care. We want them anyway. These guys, you'll...
Can you imagine the conversations in the White House? Like, just to be a fly on the wall in that office with him in power. Oh, it's scary.
So there is, however, a lesson here that I would like to share. And this this comes from Ishak Adizes. We haven't spoken about Ishak on the podcast for a while, but he's a bloke that I've taken a lot of stuff from. And he's got a little talk, which I'll post in the show notes, just on trust and respect. And one of the examples he uses is, if you think of Switzerland, Switzerland is a combination of the French, Italians, and Germans. 3 countries that have been at each other's throats at every world war going back however long. But they make it work. What is Switzerland known for? Pharmaceuticals, banking, stash your money away. It's all trust-related stuff. right? Switzerland has high trust and respect as an environment. When the French go to visit the Italians, they speak Italian. When the Italians go and visit Germans, they speak German. There's this embedded trust and respect within the system that makes them highly integrated, which then makes them highly functional. If you have a look at the US, there's two things. One, you can just see there is no trust and respect. The polarization of Democrats versus Republicans over the last 15 to 20 years, every year the erosion of trust and respect just keeps getting worse and worse. And what happens is when there's absolutely no trust and respect, we can't actually work together on anything. We end up in the polar opposites, and then the world implodes upon us. And it's the same with organizations. You find me a high-performing organization, there will be high levels of trust and respect inside there. And we need that trust and respect, so then that way we can go and solve problems. We can capitalize on opportunities. We can have our energy going out to achieve all of these different things. And the reality is that the US now is effectively an aging power that is below the threshold of being able to solve any particular issue, from my humble opinion. I have difficulty going to some of the areas just because of the way the system has broken down, the way capitalism in its worst form has eroded so many parts. Tilda? Daddy's in the middle of standing on a pulpit yelling at a crowd of people.
Screaming at the rain.
Daddy's on a call, buddy. Okay. Yeah.
It's my first day touching the roof of the trampoline.
Okay. Wow. Well done. You touched
That's
the roof on the
impressive.
trampoline by yourself. All right, buddy. Can you shut the door?
Okay. Bye, Daddy.
Bye, buddy.
Hi, Matilda.
Yeah. So if you have a look at the cultures, trust and respect is one of those things that permeates. Now, if we go back just 12 years, I'll just play this little video here.
Thank you very much, Jim, for this opportunity. I want to thank Governor Romney and the University of Denver for your hospitality.
Thank you, Jim. It's an honor to be here with you, and I appreciate the chance to be with the president. And congratulations to you, Mr. President, on your anniversary. I'm sure this was the most romantic place you could imagine, here with me. So congratulations.
When it comes to our tax code, Governor Romney and I both agree that our corporate tax rate is too high.
Chalk and cheese for what we've got at the moment.
100%. 100%. There was so much respect just in that last one. In, what was it, 2012?
2012. And look, you can still have different ideologies, difference of opinions, but when there is no trust and respect, when there isn't that base level, you just don't have function. And we see it with companies that have disappeared or companies that are in a lot of trouble. That trust and respect has eroded. They've entered this aging phase where we no longer seek to solve the problem. We seek to blame people. It's always some person's fault instead of saying, well, what is the problem and how we go and solve this? And all that's happening is the US is aging and dying. And it's going to be a big problem, I think, because the US has been, whether you like it or not, right or wrong, has been the sort of sheriff for a long period of time, but they're going to pull back and they're going to implode on themselves. Now, we're in venture capital. I obviously like the capitalistic system, but the word healthy has to be put in. And if you have a look at what happened to middle America, the way capitalism has gutted middle America over the last 30 or 40 years, you've got a big group of people that are really angry. And then the problem is when a populist like Trump comes in, make America great again, people that have no hope, don't trust, vote for these people that spin them a line. The reality is it's only going to get worse for them. But they're angry that for the first time in many generations, the current generation of people are going to have a lower standard of living and a lower quality of life than their parents.
Yeah, very true. And it's very noticeable. And to your point about bringing back relevance for founders, like you can see these, when you're aware of these little signals of trust and respect, you can see it play out between co-founders or within teams or in boardrooms or with investors. And it is something that we're attuned to when we're working with companies, is measuring for or looking for high trust and respect in the team.
I trust you, Jack.
Thanks, Dad.
I respect you even
I needed.
I respect you
Aaron,
even if you
not
don't
so
come to
much.
even if you don't come to my wedding, I still respect you, buddy.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, how would we measure trust and respect if someone who's like
Zero
close
respect.
in the team. To screw you, I'm not coming to your wedding. Or as my sister would say to me, this wedding.
Second and last. This is my second and last.
Hey, that's me. That is me. All right.
How are we going to segue from all that into AI helping with pitch decks?
Into something functional that our listeners may have actually tuned into. Well, we could segue that if we got rid of politicians and had an AI just pragmatically rule the world and tell us what to do in the best interest of everyone, maybe we'd have a better time. And the best place to start with that is AI on pitch decks.
That was good. Well done.
So there was an article in Capital Brief by Hugo Mathers talking about how AI is being used in the pitch deck process, and it interviewed another number of people, including Alan Jones of Make Ventures. So I'll just read a bit of it. Startups are turning to artificial intelligence to help them raise capital. Sydney crowdfunding platform VentureCrowd is releasing new tools to help them do it. So Steve Marbani says it writes content, it synthesizes messaging, it can do a whole bunch of stuff that we know typically a founder might not be very good at. By using AI in a self-serve guided experience, we help founders to improve their pitch and to help investors make more informed investment decisions. Alan Jones also made mention, in my capacity as a startup mentor, I would advise anybody who's preparing to pitch for investment to use AI tools as part of the mix. What's our thought?
I think it totally makes sense to use AI tools to help. The watch out is making sure whatever you're sharing is information that could end up in public domain, because often these AI tools, your data becomes part of the model. We use it with our investor memos, different AI tools to shape paragraphs, and I use it when writing certain letters and other things. So I think it's a powerful tool.
Yeah, I totally agree. I wouldn't rely on it, but it's definitely a good data point to get feedback on or try and improve, particularly if you set the parameters. So like Don, you're very big on problem, solution, outcome. So if you then tell the language model, this is how I want it to be with the parameters, and then it can spit it back to you. And it's really good at refining what you've already got. I think 100% it's useful, but as a founder, you can't substitute the hard work of putting in and putting the time and effort into crafting a good pitch deck.
What percentage relevance do you think the pitch deck has? My view, in the overall capital raising process, I'd say it accounts for probably less than 5%. And by that, I mean the purpose of the pitch deck is to get a call, whereas I think people overweight that the pitch deck, because in the news, you'll hear how this pitch deck raised $5 million. It's like bullshit.
No.
How this founder with a network of people submitted a pitch deck. I just fear sometimes founders put a bit too much effort, and in putting too much effort, it becomes too long, too complex, too jargony, too whatever else. Whereas a few slides that just get that interest, so an investor goes, shit, I'd like to have at least a chat to this founder or founders. That's where I think to be careful is.
I totally agree with you there. I think if you were to measure the pitch deck as part of the entire process, I think you said 5%, I'd say even less, but it is a critical step to get that first combo if you're not getting a warm intro. So in the absence of a warm referral, if you're going totally cold outbound essentially, or where there's someone who has low conviction, it's an important thing, but it is just to get that next meeting. So I think for me, it's using AI to make it more succinct and understandable at a quick read. You definitely have to watch out abs. Don't overcook it.
The article continues on that the VentureCrowd one, in addition to the revamped platform, Sydney-based VentureCrowd has created Sophie, a virtual capital raising coach that uses a large language model and natural language processing to guide startup founders through their journey. Trained on more than 10 years worth of data from VentureCrowd's crowdfunding platform, Sophie supports founders through a capital raise by drafting compelling deal pages, building a community of investors, and managing investment conversations through to financial close. It means you're not running 10,000 meetings over 12 months, or in Melanie Perkins and Canva's case, being rejected 100 times, taking 3 years to get their first dollar. I do like the idea of that coaching bit, if this works, because if it's competent and the 10 years of data is actually relevant and it can help a founder fine-tune the message, explain things that are missing or include things that should be there that aren't there. If there's a back and forth thing. I can see that value. Like the Canva not getting investment for 3 years sometimes isn't to do with the pitch deck. It's to do with all sorts of other things. But the coaching bit, I like the idea of that.
Yeah, I think the watch out in that is the implication that if Melanie had this tool, she would have not had those rejections. And I don't believe that's necessarily true. I think this is the watch out for me, is if a founder puts too much emphasis and value on what is generated by these types of tools or services, as opposed to actually listening to the market, being present with the investors and actually hearing the feedback. I think if we just rely on the tools to tell us what to do, I know that for me, that's a watch out.
I think what's going to be interesting as this evolves is the first help create the pitch deck, then give guidance on the pitch deck. Then at some point, like in the world that we live in, surely there's going to be each of our AI agents talking to other AI agents. That's going to be a first pass filter of the stuff that we like and the stuff that we don't like, until one day we're made irrelevant and selling pencils from a paper cup.
No, I totally agree with you. But this is the thing, like you look at these AI models that are training off language, and I get why, but then they're communicating outputs also in language. Very soon we're going to hit the transition where it's one AI tool talking to another. Language will therefore, as we know it, become redundant, or almost actually an inhibitor. So I was thinking about the episode we recorded recently where our pitch deck's going to be irrelevant. I think once we hit that point and AI tools just hunt directly off your Xero accounts or whatever other system we have access to, it will change. But until then, this is the system we have.
Yeah, no, I think there's going to be tools that are like, this person's LinkedIn profile has been growing at this rate and the engagements and therefore this is somebody to check in on.
If there's like a correlation between like the influencer for LinkedIn, right, and any product they push, they've already got the distribution.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Like that's...
And then how do you find the founders that are getting success and traction despite themselves with maybe some poor social media metrics? It's going to be interesting.
But yeah, combination, like you say, like Xero, I can see all sorts of data sets being found via some of these AI tools. Now, I guess a chatbot that you upload your deck to and get some advice is the kind of thing that accelerators traditionally have helped with. And there was an article in Startup Daily by Yong-Sing Ning, what Australian startup accelerators can do to prove their worth. She writes, when Australian startup fever took hold in the mid-2010s, state governments used taxpayer money to support high-growth technology businesses with the intent to leverage the benefits of these businesses to future-proof their economies. As a result, sophisticated industry scaffolding began to emerge in support of these fearless few willing to dive in and try their hand at elusive treasures entrepreneurship can bring. I wonder if this has been written by AI. That's a lot of words to try and get my stupid brain around. Anyway, the long and the short of the article is that Australia needs these startup accelerators and these hubs, and it talks about some room to improvement. She talks a number of studies have recently emerged that compare incubated startups to non-incubated startups, with the latter sometimes faring better in terms of growth and performance. So that is interesting that people that haven't gone through an incubator in some of these studies have actually fared better. And I think that aligns to something we've discussed in some previous episodes, that you have to be careful that actually the best founders just get in there, get it done, work out what to do. They don't sit around waiting to be told what to do. That might be too aggressive.
No, I agree. I've been involved in a number of accelerators since 2012, and there was a line in there that as a result, a sophisticated industry scaffolding began to emerge. It's like you could describe a Ponzi scheme as a sophisticated industry scaffolding. Like it wasn't that sophisticated. I think if you were to compare outcomes of Australian accelerators versus global, I actually think if you're measuring on true metrics that matter, they haven't performed as well overall. Like UK, the last stat I heard was close to half of their unicorns came out of accelerator programs or had been through an accelerator program at some point, whereas we just don't see that in Australia. And the data they refer to here is true, like the outperformance of companies that haven't touched the innovation ecosystem versus those that have. So I think, I think there was a lot of poisoning of the well in Australia with a lot of funding going into accelerator programs that meant a lot of programs were spun up purely to get the funding. And I think it led to some adverse outcomes. But good ones like StartMate, absolutely still kicking goals. And there are a number of good programs in Australia that's still doing well.
So like when I think of Canva, Afterpay, and Atlassian, I don't think any of those went through an accelerator. I still think accelerators have a place in the ecosystem. And just as VC funding isn't for every business, doesn't mean it can't be a great business still. Like the same, every founder may not be a fit for an accelerator, but I can definitely think of the right stereotype, someone who could go into an accelerator and really come out the other end a way more competent founder. So for any founders listening, I think like the takeaway here is like just assess it, like, and see whether or not you think you are actually a fit and whether or not it's worth the time for the dilution.
Yeah, it's a good point, Jack. And actually, yeah, there's an event on the Gold Coast this Thursday, which is a bit of a how do we improve the ecosystem down there. And I was asked to pull some data together on the last 12 years of that ecosystem. And then Dr. Baden Uren, who Bades is a big part of Tribe, a shareholder as well, he wrote a post just on all the touch points of different events on the Goldie. And it's to your point, Jack, often founders in Australia might go through one of these programs and that venture might fail, but they grow from that and go on to form a second or third venture that does do well. And we probably don't have accurate data on, or at least not that I've seen yet, on that impact, which I think is highly valuable.
Yeah, like you look at all the resources YC, open sources, and it's bloody helpful. But like you don't need to do the accelerator to get those resources. It's all available online. And like as we know, the reality is a good founder will find a way through regardless of what is out there. Like they will always find a way through. But there may be someone who is on the edge of not sure whether or not they even want to be a founder. They get pushed into an accelerator and they grow all this, like all the tool set to then feel confident and to pursue this problem. So it's individual.
That's very true. And a rising tide lifts all boats. Like accelerators do also play a role in activating new investors, in getting ex-entrepreneurs to come in and mentor and develop their mentoring skills, who then go on and support other companies. So yeah, you've made some good points there, Jack, after my aggressive stance.
I just wouldn't, if you're a founder and someone's oversold you the promises of an accelerator, don't believe it. And like, there are reasons and you should make the decision whether or not it's right for you. Like, don't let other people tell you why, especially someone from the accelerator. Like, you do your own work and work it out for yourself.
Yeah, this article goes on to talk about how accelerators could bring AI to the startups that I'm a bit unsure of. Providing more data. So accelerators being able to provide a suite of tools that these startups wouldn't be able to ordinarily get themselves. And then one of the headings is dispelling implementation overwhelm, and just talks about helping founders not get so overwhelmed in implementing the ideas. Now, there's fee for service accelerators, but then there's been some corporate VCs that have also acted almost as some accelerators. And all that's old is new again. We've got NAB Ventures.
It's like the cycle is playing again.
So bank VCs have had a bit of a checkered history, as a lot of these corporate ones. Somebody really champions it. They get all excited. They come in. They're going to easily make all of these great investments and get some great returns. Then it doesn't quite go the way that we'd like. That person often leaves, somebody else takes over and goes, why the hell are we invested in all of these little companies that are losing us money? This is a ridiculous idea. They then start to pull back, they get out, then it starts again.
Yep.
And so in an article by Andrew Cornell from Capital Brief, it says the big banks have a mixed record with their VC funds, but National Australia Bank remains committed to NAB Ventures and is on the lookout. A decade or so ago, when nimble fintechs and startups were threatening to see off incumbent dinosaurs of telecoms and banking, big companies around the world started setting up their own venture funds to tap into the innovation and energy of these startups. The big four banks did it too, as did other large companies like Telstra. It hasn't turned out as planned. Last week, Telstra announced it would sell off its fund, Telstra Ventures, renaming it Titanium. Of the banks, Westpac has gone quiet. Commonwealth Bank's X15 Ventures has more of the attributes of an accelerator. ANZ's 1835 still seems to be settling into new management, and NAB Ventures seems to be trying to remain true to its original labelling and strategy. So the article goes on to say that NAB sees themselves as strategic investors. We're looking for a return in terms of the experience to our customers, or solving a problem, or keeping them safer. All of those factors also play into how we look at the return. Banks are always spending money for better technology and better security. So I think similar to your comments before, Jack, where you've got to look at the accelerator and then look at yourself and make a good decision. I think the same comes from these corporate VCs. As it's described there, there's almost an inherent conflict of what was just described, because they're looking at it not just from a lens of let's grow this company, do whatever we can to make this company successful, wherever that may come from. The lens they've got is additional stuff for their customers, problem solving. It's more, if there's an opportunity that makes the bank looks good, that's really focused on the bank customers, if that's not fully in the interest of the company, that's where we tend to see some conflicts start to come out.
Yeah, totally agree with you on that point. If you look at, we spoke about Telstra Ventures' performance last week, and I attribute part of that to the fact that there didn't have to be a tie back to Telstra itself. They were investing as a standalone fund versus those that we've seen where there needs to be some tie back to the bank's customers or some other corporate play, or they're looking to license some technology internally for some competitive advantage. Like that conflict of interest between the founder, other investors that have already invested in that company, and then the corporates. See, like it's a recipe for disaster. So I think it is really important to understand, not just to pick on corporates. I think that the lesson for founders is understand your investors, understand their intent, understand why they're investing, what they're looking for, and what success looks like for them.
Yeah, and I think if corporates are looking at spinning out a corporate VC out of the company, like I think it goes back to deal flow and whether or not you get enough quality deal flow. Like the difference between spinning it out internally or backing a specialist VC, maybe, for example, a fintech. Like it all goes back to deal flow and whether or not you get substantial coverage of the market, because there's no point of spinning out a VC if you get bugger all deal flow. Like the chance of you being successful are super slim. And even though this game looks super sexy, like it's bloody hard.
Yeah. And that's why things like YC's developed such a brand now that I think YC 15 years ago, the commitment was we'll give you 20,000. Now on average, it's like 500,000, but they're also getting the creme de la creme, because the brand has developed so much that great founders who know the value of YC are all applying, and their deal flow just becomes second to none, which is why people then seek to invest in YC companies.
It's such a good point, Jack. Like, can they, what we talk about, right? See, pick, win the deal as well, then support it and see it through to exit. Like that, those capabilities aren't inherent in a bank. So you have to, as a corporate manager making that decision, you've got to have conviction that you are able to do those things to win.
Yeah, totally agree, Aaron.
And so the article says we can invest from Series C through to A and B. They write checks of 250,000 through to single checks of 10 million. Like I find that interesting, and that's really wide. And maybe we're just not as smart as some. But what we find is that the managers that do really well find their space. But 250 to 10 million, like your companies that are taking a $10 million check are totally different to 250. The deal flow is totally different. The expertise that you need to handle the internal contracts and documentation, the post-investment management support's different. I'm not saying it can't be done, but like they've only got 100 million. I guess they are part of a bank, so they can pull resources from everywhere. But anyway, I think it's good, any money in the ecosystem, but just be really careful.
Or they could deploy that fund into fund managers, new and emerging fund managers like Tribe, where they professionally manage the funds on their behalf.
Yeah, the problem is that word professional. That's what gets us. Speaking of emerging managers, there was an article out in AFR by Yolanda Redrup and Nick Bonyhady, and it was an article put together from some comments that James Tyan of SquarePeg had made at a recent conference. SquarePeg partner James Tyan said that it was not just startups facing financial pressures of the so-called tech winter, but the funds themselves. It's a really tough fundraising environment, Mr. Tyan said. Wealthy families, endowment managers and super funds were reducing the number of funds entrusted with their money. They're all raising the bar on the types of folk that they want to invest in. There are funds that are better and there are funds that are worse, but even the younger ones doing a good job may not have the runway to show how good a job they've done, and that's a very difficult position to be in. This sort of ties back to last episode where we were talking about Tenacious getting their first close done at 18 million after doing their first fund at 35 million in 2021. It's definitely a difficult time out there.
Yeah, good article. And it's good that this is being talked about. We've been talking about this for, I feel like 18 months before the UK trip last year. And it's consistent with some of the signals we were seeing and hearing from the market, both here and similarly in the UK, with particularly lower level roles, people leaving VC firms to go and take jobs in portfolio company. We heard the stat, I can't remember what it was off the top of my head, in the UK about the number of funds that were unable to go on to successfully raise their second fund who are of that vintage. So I think there's a lot more still to come in the Australian market along this vein.
Yeah, I actually think it's a tough time for all VCs. So except the small percentage that just have an absolute outlier track record. The way I think about it, and we've said this internally, like a good time to raise a fund is normally a shit time to invest into startups. And then a good time to invest in startups is usually a difficult time to raise a fund. And we're in that stage right now. Like it's a really good time to invest in startups, but it's really bloody hard to raise a fund. But I would much rather be in that position and have to fight through and find a way to get the smallest possible fund, e.g. $10 million off the ground, to then set you up for the long-term success, like any day of the week.
So in the last episode of 20 VC that I haven't finished listening to yet, but about halfway through, someone had done some research post like financial crises. A lot of people get forced out of employment and they then have to go and start a business. So they're starting a business at a really shitty, difficult time. And this bit of data that they went through is that the founders that made their way through those difficult times, started at the difficult time, had less resources, ultimately had more success than founders that were starting stuff at like the really good times. And I think that just comes back to life's pattern that the best grapes are grown in harsh conditions.
Yeah. And to add to that, like it's necessity. And we talk about resource constraint mindset versus raising a shit ton of capital. Like it all ties back. Like it's a mindset thing. And you can see that there's a pattern there playing out.
It's also the view on time, right? Like the time horizon, the lens you put on it. And for us, it's a long-term play. And Donick reminds me of the conversation we were having with a portfolio company this morning. There are some businesses where it's a land grab and you've got to move fast and you've got to capture the market. But then there's others where you have time to build a really solid, durable business. And in venture, that's what we have. We can. But I think particularly in 21, there was a lot of capital deployed out of FOMO and short-term kind of thinking. And so I think if you have the right, that's the difficulty. Your point, Jack, like if you can control mindset and emotion through the cycles and zoom out and recognize the cycle when you're in it, which I think is part of the challenge.
Yeah, like with the company this morning, they raised based on certain forecasts and certain expectations. And then we were having the chat and I was just having a look at some of their expenditure. And what it's turned out in hindsight is that some of their infrastructure isn't yet developed. And that's par for the course in this game. So my view was we'll stop with the expenditure. And this expenditure was like marketing expenditures, which would then flow through and reduce revenue. But now that we're in the tent and we're invested, as long as we've got good open communication, whatever else, we're here to build long-term, durable, healthy businesses. So if we've got to have a few quarters of less revenue, but we build the infrastructure to then accelerate later, that's what we should be doing.
To throw a bit of empathy for the founders. The problem with our market as well, like we have mandates on funds, which like I'm all for, we are here for the long term. But the reality is when you take VC money or PE money, there's a timeline when they want their liquidity back, which is why like you look at Buffett, Munger, even TDM, like the evergreen fund, the dynamics of that, the shareholders are just so aligned to the founders of the business. But yeah, that's just my thoughts. And I understand it's so hard being a founder.
Yeah.
It's such a good point though, Jack. Adrian DeMarco talked about that. One of the things where he believes he's got an advantage over VC funds is he doesn't have a time frame to be out. Like he doesn't have to go and demonstrate returns on capital to go and raise another fund like a VC firm does. So he's able to be much more patient.
Yeah. Like the reality is if we back a really wonderful business, we won't let it go within the 7 to 10 years. And I'm sure our LPs will also be on the same alignment there.
With secondaries becoming more prevalent and easier to get away, the other reason why it's not going to be the same as evergreen, but on a syndicate basis, is that if the companies are doing well, but the shareholder needs a little bit of liquidity, there'll be an ability to do a liquidity. The question will become, what's the haircut that they have to take? But if your stake has gone up 10x and you want to take 10% off the table to go and do something else with or solve the problem, if you've got to take a little bit of a haircut on that just to get the liquidity, quite often you'll be happy to do that because of the uplift that you've had. And so I think as the markets mature locally and secondaries become a bigger part, have a look at Safety Culture, have a look at Canva, have a look at all these companies that got to a certain scale. They still created liquidity along the way for people, even though they hadn't had their final liquidity event. Now, the article goes on to say new smaller venture capital funds to launch in the past few years include Side Stage Ventures, Afterwork Ventures, Black Nova, Galileo Ventures, and Flying Fox.
We missed out, boys.
We missed out.
We're not listed
We're not. This is what happens when you don't spend advertising dollars.
or don't reside in Sydney or Melbourne.
That's true. Where's Black Nova?
Sydney.
Sydney, Galileo, Sydney, Flying Fox, Melbourne, Afterwork, Sydney, Side Stage. I'm not sure. I think
Sydney
Sydney.
as well, I think, yeah.
There's nowhere to go after that comment. But shout out to the Black Nova boys, always referring good deal flow through to us.
And Afterwork.
Yeah, Afterwork too.
Afterwork as well. Jesse and the team. We've done a co-investment there with Canopy. And Flying Fox, I can still picture Rachel's jacket from South Start like 2 years ago. It was...
Rachel's a bloody legend. She and I were on the board of Startup Oz together along with Lainey. That was quite an era. Yeah, she's a pretty cool cat.
Well, I think this is going to be difficult, but whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're probably right. And the good thing is we think we can. Plus, we've been backed through ourselves and shareholders' capital. So we've got a runway to achieve greatness.
Absolutely.
So let's get into a few raises that have occurred this week. 5V backs worker safety startup, One Breadcrumb, in a $4 million funding round. The Melbourne startup wants to be the latest in a growing list of construction software success stories to hail from Australia. Now, Australia's had things like Aconex, which sold to Oracle for $1.6 billion in 2017. Imagine if Aconex hadn't sold in 2017. I wonder what it'd be worth now. Safety Culture and now One Breadcrumb. Now, what the company aims to do is replace paper-based workflows for tasks such as site check-ins, safety inductions, permit applications with digital solutions through mobile interface. What's interesting is that this is becoming a busier space. Like the pitch that we had last week that we're following up again has some vibes here. This whole reg tech safety, taking paper and making it digital is on one hand, I think it's going to happen. It's going to be digital, but backing the winner and in a very competitive market, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, I have now seen multiple companies that they are just trying to displace safety culture in a vertical. So they come from the industry and there's a clear problem, but the solution on the market, which is normally safety culture, it doesn't solve the full solution. Like it's just a generalist and it doesn't go the 4, 5, 6 levels deep, like deep enough for the industry's problems.
And I think with someone the size of Safety Culture's Val, I can see them in the years to come. If the market is big enough, they're going to start buying some of these vertical solutions.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's probably the play of some of these that we're seeing. It is interesting when Safety Culture started that they weren't sector focused. Like they were picking up things across aviation and other sectors.
I didn't think they have to. They were that early. There was no one else in the market. Like they had the luxury and they were literally digitizing a paper-based process. Like it was nothing more. Now it's like there are so many more steps we demand because of where we are in the world.
Well, have a look at, so our investor onboarding, if you look at what we had to do, we had to get documents, which we do manually. We then had to KYC people. Then we had to do deal completion. Then it was Adrian actually who referred us to the platform we're now using. And it takes each of those steps through that vertical. And with a few little teething problems that we're working through, it provides us the end-to-end solution and displaces the generalist approach that we were doing before.
Yeah, and has made a number of different services that we were band-aid and duct taping together redundant for us because it's all rolled into one package.
Now, in this article, 5E Capital investor Chris Gillings described One Breadcrumb as providing the missing piece from technology stack for high-risk industries. Australia is leading the global trend towards the digitization of the construction industry with its highly regulated market, its high labour and materials costs, forcing sites to look towards technology to drive efficiencies and increase margins. Now, also, we will have Chris Gillings joining us next Monday.
Sweet. I'm looking forward to it.
For a session, we'll be talking 5E Capital, but also...
the latest Cut Through Ventures report.
That's right. But yeah, it's going to be Interesting to see how this all evolves. And I must admit, when I look at these verticalized software options, on one hand, it's interesting and it's exciting, but on the other hand, a world that is just so full of SaaS and there's many different ways to solve a problem. The vertical solution to it must be really bespoke, must be like meet the needs perfectly. So then that way the switching costs become really high, because what's happening is your customer acquisition costs are just going through the roof. Part of this morning's catch up with a portfolio company is their CAC is just so high. And the only way that you can deal with that CAC is making sure that your switching costs is so incredibly high that you can effectively charge a premium.
Sorry, I'm distracted because Marin's messaging. She fell over in the driveway and needs new pants. So she's got to come in.
It's the common pattern when we podcast. It's someone has a crash. I was like, surely people on the thumb track doing jumps on the bike.
I have no frigging clue. Side planted it, slipped in the driveway. I need new pants.
And the need for pants is from the outside or the inside?
That's all right. She's all good. She can make do, apparently.
Chris, if you're listening, we'll be far more professional when we...
Don't lie, Don. Come on.
Set expectations low, then exceed. Not the other way around.
Well, jumping to another capital raise, Samsara has just raised 100 million. Recycling innovator Samsara Eco has raised funds from new and existing investors through a Series A funding round to scale its enzymatic recycling capabilities for recycling millions of tons of plastic waste. Samsara raised 100 million in the funding round. New and existing investors include Singapore's Temasek, Australian funds Main Sequence and Titanium Ventures, leisurewear giant Lululemon, Woolheim Capital, Japan's Hitachi Ventures, and US Capital Group DCVC. Hell of a Series A. Things like Samsara give me some confidence that we will find technological ways for humans and environment to ultimately balance so we don't totally destroy this place. Because the way they take plastic and deal with it, I think, is really innovative. But as someone that produces an unbelievable amount of plastic waste, it's not sustainable. So hopefully things like this will resolve it.
Yeah, I tend to default to the assumption that tech will solve everything. Let's see.
The one for me that really always upsets me, and I forget each time, but next time I'll try and remember, is when I go and get sushi, I'll get these two little plastic things, and the sushi lasts literally like 14 seconds. I've shoved it down my throat. And then I've got these two plastic, but they're like the soft plastic, not really recyclable ones, straight into the bin. Like I should just go there with like a paper towel with two hands out and say, fill up my hands with my sushi. And then straight down the throat. But like the lifetime of that plastic was measured in the seconds.
If you're consuming sushi that fast, you should just lie down in a chair and they just put it straight in.
It's like that Simpsons episode. It's like he eats like a pig. He's like, no, a pig chews their food. He's more like a duck.
But you're right though, the sushi, and it always comes with the multiple tubes of soy sauce and the rubber bands around. There's a lot of waste product.
So from this article, the ability to infinitely recycle plastic in an environmentally friendly way is a game changer for brands and our planet. Absolutely. So no, I'm really looking forward to seeing this one hit commercial greatness.
Yeah, same.
Now, along the lines of capital raising, I saw this post, which is taking data from SaaSta in Europe. The post was from Dirk Schemler, and it says, what does it take to raise a Series A in 2024? Check out these SaaS KPI benchmarks from Robert and Harry's session at SaaSta Europe. So what it looks at is different levels of ARR, lifetime value, net dollar retention, gross dollar retention, burn multiple, etc. We'll go through those for companies looking for a Series A. Now, so there's 4 columns: unremarkable, good, excellent, outlier. So in unremarkable, ARR less than $500,000, good, ARR between $500,000 and $1 million, excellent, 1.5 million to 2.5 million, outlier over 2.5 million. But then we've got to take into the next thing, because you could have had 1.5 million, but it's taken you 10 years to get there. So LTM ARR growth year on year. So unremarkable, less than 2 times, good, 2 to 3 times, excellent, 3 to 6 times, outlier, more than 6 times. Net dollar retention, less than 100%, good is 100 to 110%, excellent, 110% to 130%, outlier, 130%. Burn multiples, good is somewhere between 1.75 and 3. Excellent is between 1.25 and 1.7. And outlier is less than 1.25, sorry. Time to recover CAC, unremarkable, 25 months plus. Good, 16 to 25 months. Excellent, 12 to 16 months. And outlier is less than 12 months. Sales cycle, more than 24 months. Good, 12 to 18 months. Excellent, 9 to 24 months. Outlier less than 9 months. So there's some other data there that I'll put in the show notes, but valuations and all of those things are driven partly by these metrics. So it's good to understand for people to be able to benchmark themselves.
Yeah, and just to note that those currency ones, they'd all be USD, right? In terms of this.
Yeah.
And was that specifically B2B?
So just because of the sales cycle one.
Yeah, but look, it's useful for founders to know. It's a bit of benchmarking in terms of where they're at, and these all factor into valuations.
I wish they did this for each sales channel. So if you're enterprise, give me this. If you're then field sales, if you're direct, like, do you know what I mean? It'd just make it so much easier. And then, Don, you'd love this. Like if we do a pitch, right? And then we get all their metrics come through and it just gives you a traffic light system to show exactly what their metrics are.
Well, that's the other thing for listeners. This is red and orange and green and light green. And for those that know me, that know that I like to color code a few things.
Don's love language, traffic lights, traffic light color coding.
Coming back to that AI thing, it's not really AI, but in the future, it'll be like, all right, got your pitch deck, great. Just throw your metrics into here, or which metric management platform are you using? We'll just connect it to that, and that'll give us the info.
Which I think any SaaS or any software company now, if you go into a data room, it actually should be like you should be using these platforms because they're so good, like Mosaic, SaaS Grid, and then like it's full transparency for an investor.
And a lot of people think that investors want absolute perfection. That's not the case. There's a threshold level, but we're not silly enough to think that you've got everything sorted out. What we need to understand is there is some momentum, that there is a great team that understands, at least an approach to try and solve these issues, that you've got the right TAM dynamics, so that needs to be accurately represented, that you've got some durability, blah, 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 all those things. Well, that's our news bit for today. Might jump into, only got a few quick charts, should I say? Sorry to misrepresent what they actually are. Let me just zoom in here. Can you see my screen this time?
Yep.
So we touched on this last week, but this is another visualization that caught my eye because there's, as we were just talking before, there's red and there's green and there's white. So there's multiple colors. So US large caps total return as of June 30. Like the US large caps is up 15%, but small caps is down 0.8. Growth stocks are up 20%, but value is down 6%. Just the US as a whole is up 15%. Internationally is only up 5.6%. Semiconductors is up 50%, but regional banks are down 5%. So just some, again, where you're invested makes a bit of difference. And then the other chart that's next to it is for every 1,000 point increase in the NASDAQ composite, how many days did it take to get there? And from 17,000 to 18,000, it took 31 days, which is actually a record. Now, imagine being invested from 2000 because it took 6,258 days to go from 5,000 points to 6,000 points. 17 years. So be careful when you invest. Now, we've discussed that I don't think NVIDIA is exactly like Cisco, but the bottom chart is Cisco from 1995 to 2000, and the top chart is NVIDIA from 2019 to 2024. So it's the 5 years prior, and they're both up roughly the same. Cisco at this time was up 3,600%, and NVIDIA is up 3,400%. Now, history never repeats, doesn't rhyme. We know what happened to Cisco. It shit the bed. I think NVIDIA is a little bit different, but seeing as this is charts and not charts, there's something that probably ends up irrelevant. What's interesting is in the 5 years leading up to its peak in March 2000, Cisco's price to sales ratio moved from 7 times to 39 times as it briefly became the world's largest company. In the 9 years leading to its June 2024 peak, NVIDIA went from 9 times sales to 42 times sales and briefly became the world's largest company. So again, NVIDIA and Cisco, from a sales point of view, so keep in mind this isn't margins, still up many times. Can it grow into that valuation of 42 times price to sales? Well, we'll see. I thought this was interesting. This chart is the percentage of US homeowners without a mortgage, and it's grown from 32% up to 39%. So 32% in 2010, and it just keeps going up every year to 39%. So the reason why I think that's interesting is just interest rates going up affects less and less people. Now, the big driving force is the aging US population with baby boomers retiring and paying out their mortgages. I'd say the same dynamic has to be here, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'd
I
say
think so.
consistent.
If you think of the baby boomer generation and the amount of cash.
But that's super interesting. Like when you look at the other charts in previous weeks around percentage of household debt and other things, like it's showing the widening disparity of wealth, right? Like that.
Yeah.
It's quite an interesting stat.
But then when you look at like inflation, it's the boomers that are spending the money. It's the younger demographic that don't have the disposable income.
Yeah. And when we have a look at, speaking of inflation, Jack, core US CPI continues to go down. And so in May 24, it came out that it was at 2.6%. And so that's why the US and Australia are two different economies, and why the US is likely to have some interest rate drops because its inflation is dropping, whereas Australia's is reaccelerating. And if you have a look at this bottom chart, let me just reduce the size here. You can just see how the US Fed fund rate correlates to the core PCI. And so once that core PCE comes down, with that core PCE dropping, it's just going to be interesting to see if interest rates follow suit. I think they will in the US. I think it's going to go up in Australia. It used to be the case that you have a balanced portfolio of bonds and equities. People with bonds have been smashed with the way interest rates have been going up. And so this is the drawdowns, like the number of months that the bond indexes have gone down. And this goes back to the 1980s, actually 1970s. And previously, the most months in a drawdown was July 1980 to October 1981. And that was 16 months. 12 months was 2013 to 2014, 2016 to 2017, February 1994 to January 1995. And then there were like 1987, 1979, all of these where there was like 9 months, 8 months, 5 months, 4 months. We are currently sitting at 47 months in a drawdown on bond indexes. Like just, what's that? 3 times more than any other drawdown in bonds. Now, I remember talking with one of our larger investors, almost 2 years ago, thought bonds were good value. Good thing that they've a long-term holder because they've had another, 24 months of drawdown. So the question becomes is how many more months is it going to draw down? And it's a record in terms of the max drawdown. Whereas before, the previous peak of a max drawdown was 1979 to 1980 of 12.9%. All of the other drawdowns have been around 3%, 5%, 4%. We're actually at 17.2%. So people sitting with big bond portfolios that have held, they're sitting on a fairly big pain. This is a chart of the number of listed companies in the US and the number of US equity investment funds. And what it means is that there are more funds to invest in than actually the underlying listed equities.
Far out.
And we wonder why everything keeps going up.
Capital inflows.
Man, that's shocking.
This is a chart of the temporary visa holders coming to Australia back to 2006. So in 2007, it was, 100,000?
Yeah.
And now we're at about 2.3 million. It had a big dip after COVID, but then it's just been a straight line upwards. So that bottomed out in COVID at 1.6 million. And since then, the monthly, not seasonally adjusted numbers just hit 2.4 million. Now, we need external IP, we need external labor, we need all of those things, but it's one of the things that is contributing to the housing situation. And so we need governments to pull their fingers out and deal with some of the housing problems.
I was going to say, overlay the property market price on this chart.
Probably the same thing.
Yeah. Brisbane just became, the second most expensive property market in Australia?
Yeah.
Adelaide's coming. Don't you worry, boys.
Well, and I've said a couple of times, I've got a project with a business partner where we've got 160 lots that we are itching to get out of the ground. And that 160 lots is a rounding error. The entire area with all the other developers, there's like another 16,000 lots. Just can't get infrastructure, can't get state government to pull their fingers out, can't get people to work together.
So they're holding up the approval process.
Oh, shit, yeah. There is hundreds of thousands of lots that are held up around
Shit's
Queensland.
Yeah.
Like, we are dead set ready to go. Right across the road, so like 8 meters away, is a state school. A kilometre down the road is like all of the big housing projects. And on our side of the road, we can't get approval for infrastructure.
Oh, man. That is so frustrating.
And if it keeps happening, the interest bill will ensure my kids go to a public school. Just for something a bit daft, how airline seating works. First class, business class, premium economy, and economy. Then it goes into the revenue per square foot. And the most profitable is actually premium economy. It's 2 to 3 times more than economy, but only costs the airline slightly more. So that's where they're pulling a lot of their margin. Economy is often unprofitable. Business is then profitable. And first class, and I guess that's why a lot of airlines have been killing first class, is not actually that profitable.
I wonder if you measure like lifetime value of first class customers, if it changes at all with other flight paths where you may not have that same cabin square footage for those travelers. But yeah, interesting data.
That's actually a good one, Don.
I got to say, I like this chart, Don.
We don't say that often, but when we do.
Yeah. So this isn't a chart, but I just thought this was funny because it's a segue. How many narcissists does it take to change a light bulb? None, because they use gaslighting. Now, speaking of narcissists, here's a chart on the valuation of SpaceX.
You always find a way, Don.
Oh, how's a segue?
Love will always find a way. Now, to give Elon credit here, that is just an up and the right. So SpaceX in 2002 was, I guess that's 190 million, 300 million, 800 million, 2010, $1 billion, 2014, 10 billion, 2018, 21 billion, 2020, 36 billion, 21, 100 billion, 22, 150 billion, now 210 billion.
I was expecting you to play this episode, the musical song that was made about Musk.
Well, Aaron, the one that I prepared earlier, I was having a bit of a chuckle, some messages with Peter Davis, who's a great listener of the podcast and has done an intro to Michael, the CEO of StartMate, to hopefully get him on. But I said that I'd have a bit of a musical number that may amuse him as we've gone back and forth on our different perspectives on Mr. Musk before. So, Peter, I share this.
Oh, we can't hear
it. Elon Musk is not that smart. Having money doesn't make you smart. Elon Musk made a couple good investments. Now a lot of weird men think he's God. Elon Musk is just a lucky jerk who made a career off other people's work. And if you think he's the best, just know he'll never be your daddy. 'Cause Elon Musk has got too many kids already. Yeah, Elon Musk is in simple terms a fraud. Whoa, whoa, your idol is flawed. And he's made Twitter even worse.
What a way to end.
Right, Don. I don't think you could hear us, but we were saying we couldn't hear it.
You couldn't hear us saying that we couldn't hear that.
Fuck. You got me laughing through that whole video, but I was just laughing at the fact that you couldn't hear us. So I'm fucking laughing.
Oh, God. It's just a comedy. All right. So I was going to say something like, just to clarify, I don't think Elon is a fraud. I think Elon commits fraud, but that's different to being a fraud. But anyway, as you didn't listen to that and you were just sitting there carrying on like pork chops, I think we just wind it up there, lads.
I think so. What are we looking forward to, boys?
I think we've done enough damage.
Jack, what are you looking forward to?
Looking forward to actually a good game this weekend. But besides that, don't have much on. So
How's the baby planning going?
it's going. Mum's buying a lot of stuff. Every time I'm coming home to do the podcast, Mum's buying different stuff. So I've got nappies and all sorts of things.
Mum's excited. That's good. That's the role of mum.
Yeah.
What
It's
about
like
you,
that
Don?
Kinney comedian guy. It's like before kids and after kids. And the before kids is like, is your mother coming over? And then after kids, is your mother coming over? What am I looking forward to? Well, we've got this deal, Grease Boss, that we've got the investor and founder call tomorrow. So really looking forward to that. That's a cracker, great crew. It's always great when you launch a deal and then a few days after launching the deal, they sign a contract that increases their ARR by like 35% just in that one fell swoop. And so they've got some really good momentum. So I'm excited getting that one out.
Yeah, same. And then the other thing I'm excited about is this event on the Goldie on Thursday, the ecosystem event and the reverse pitch. I'll be on the stage to reverse pitch Tribe. So should be a good one.
I was going to say I'm going to try and come to that one, but actually I'm going to, I'm off to do the ice bar thing tonight. So I think that will be my night out of home. Although we had Matilda go and spend a night with her cousins.
How did that go?
So good. Like one of my kids has to go to boarding school because when they're separated, the two older ones, life is so good. They don't fight with each other. They don't fight with their mother. So yeah, I think Jack would probably get the most out of boarding school, but we'll work backwards. For listeners, I'm joking. I'm joking. I love my children equally.
Always important to clarify.
Sweet. All right. Until next episode.
See you, boys.